Hello and welcome to B2B Revenue Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin. This podcast is brought to you by Testimonial Hero. Testimonial Hero creates strategic video testimonials to help you close trust gaps and ultimately close more deals faster. On this episode, I'm joined by Mike Grinberg, who is the founder and CEO at Proofpoint Marketing. Mike explains how incorrect definitions and limiting beliefs are usually the root cause of most crappy marketing, why demand creation isn't a thing, how to actually measure TAM and ICP, and why referrals aren't just from your clients and partners. Hey, Mike, welcome to the show.
Dustin, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So we're going to talk, about a few different, you refer to it as incorrect definitions and limiting beliefs and how that's the cause of a lot of poor marketing. And there's a few that we want to dive into, but I want to start off with one that, is a relatively hot topic right now. People talk about it a lot, which is demand creation, right? And your take there, which is an interesting one, is you can't actually create demand. So let's dive into that. Let's explain that for our listeners here.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say even before that is the further I've gotten along in my career, the more I've been leaning on a piece of advice I got forever ago from a mentor, which is words matter, use them wisely.
Yeah.
And like you said, these definitions, it's not like it might sound like, oh, it's just semantics. Who cares? But what I found is that having the wrong definitions, the farther away you get from the person that created the definition for a purpose in the first place, the more you end up doing the wrong things because you misunderstand the limitations of said definition.
Yeah.
Forget the fact that it might just be wrong. So the one you mentioned, like demand creation, it's not even as much a definition, I think, as it is the wording itself. Because I've on the one hand, it's great to buy into this idea of, okay, well, we have to create demand and we have to capture demand. Sounds completely legitimate, right? It's sort of like the same reason why the funnel sounds like a great concept in terms of your top funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, whatever. Problem with it is it goes against how things work, right? So if anybody who went to business school remembers, macroeconomics 101, the first thing you learn is the demand and supply curves. There's demand side economics, there's supply side economics, right? And there's a reason that concept exists. It's because supply is from the sellers, the people that create the product or the service, and demand is from the people that buy it. Meaning you can't really create demand. They either have a problem that they need to solve or they don't. It's really as simple as that. You can't manufacture a problem for them. I mean, sure, you could, I guess, but it's usually illegal, right? So that's the basic thing. So it's not as much creating demand as it is uncovering it or discovering it. Like you can help them recognize that they have the problem, or you can help them recognize that the problem is actually bigger than they thought. Well, you're not creating the demand. The demand already exists. And I think the reason why these semantics matter, in my opinion, is I think the people that really get it, I think, understand this. And they understand what they mean when they say demand creation.
Mm-hmm.
But what a lot of the, call it disciples, if you will, out there, they're doing very tactical type pushy things because they're trying to create demand. They're trying to manufacture it. And you can't. It doesn't, like, literally, physically, I don't know, the law of gravity kind of thing. Like you can't make gravity not work, unless you're in space. But
yeah, I think a key point there is shining a spotlight on the problem, essentially. And one of the key, to me, this always makes me think of category creation, which is a whole nother topic, which we'll try to avoid here. But just to use an example most are familiar with Drift, right? Because they had the whole conversational marketing. So people would argue they created demand for that. I would argue they shone a spotlight on the fact that most people hated forms. And that was a byproduct solution of it. But I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right? Is people have these problems. Yep. And then you just have to, shine on that and come up with a solution and tie the two together, essentially.
100%. I think that this actually, the reason why this is important is another one, which is, I think, people they define their TAM and their ICP incorrectly because of this, actually. It kind of really flows from that. Because if you think you can create demand, then your TAM is, well, shit, that's everybody. So it's not like you go really, really broad. But the reality is your TAM, your addressable market, is only the people that have the problem.
Yeah.
And you can't force them to have the problem. So you can't, because really the tie-in there is, if you can create demand, that means you can manufacture the scale of your TAM. And you can't. Your TAM is literally, it's the addressable market. And what market can you address with your solution? Again, it's the definition matters.
Well, and I think maybe less so now, but there's been this push from the other side of, oh, if I need funding, I'm going to say my TAM is huge. And then, we can sell to everyone. This is a $200 billion opportunity.
Yep.
Marketing in those companies is a pain in the ass.
Yep.
Like trying to market to everyone is an absolute nightmare. So that was, when I was looking for my next opportunity, when I ended up here, I wanted to go to a somewhat niche company that we knew who we sold to. We knew what we sold. It's not every company everywhere could buy us.
Yep. No, I love that you brought it up, because that's actually exactly, it's the incentives are such that it forces people to define it in the wrong way, because it gets them more funding. But then, we all see what happens with that, right? Like, especially
no, exactly.
When, capital dries out, and now good luck with your, unicorn valuation where you're not even profitable, and, all that stuff.
Yeah. Again, that's a total other topic I'm sure we can go down, but I do want to stay on this TAM and ICP one, because then, in your opinion, and you said addressable market, who you can actually address, how do you determine that then, and how do you kind of narrow that down?
I think it's a clear definition of what the pain and problem actually are. So again, to me, it's binary, meaning this company or person, whatever, they either have the problem or they don't. It's a 1 or a 0. And I think that's where people get in trouble, where they don't clearly define the problem they solve, which then makes them go, well, these people could buy from us and these people could buy from us. Well, it's not that whether they could or couldn't buy from you, that's the wrong way to look at it. Do they have the problem?
Yeah.
Because if they don't, they'll never buy from you, no matter what you do. And if you somehow convince them that they have the problem when they really don't, which is unlikely, but let's assume you figure out a way to do it through shady marketing and sales, you're not going to be terribly successful.
Yeah. The churn rate is going to be through the roof on that one. And I think the other component there too is, depending on what you sell, but do they have the problem? And also, do they have the means to actually purchase your product? Because we have that as well. Like, technically, any company could afford or could want video testimonials. We're a little bit on the higher end because we're a higher touch approach. So, a 3-person real estate agency is never going to pay our costs. So that's kind of how we looked at it as well, as do they have the need? Do they also see the value? And then can they afford it? Like, is that the right market?
Yep. Yeah. And I think that gets into kind of ICP as well, which I almost feel like, and a lot of times what people believe is ICP is actually their TAM. And what people believe is their TAM is, I don't know what the hell it is. Yeah. So it's got to get moved down. So in my opinion, TAM is they have the problem.
Yeah.
Whether they believe it's big enough to solve, or they care to solve it, or they have the means to solve it, that's irrelevant for TAM, in my opinion. They have a problem. ICP, on the flip side, to me, is they have the problem and they have the pain that's big enough, that's being caused by said problem, where they're considering it's worth solving. They might decide later, what, maybe not right now. They're at least considering it. They're actually in market. ICP, to me, they have to be in market. I think that's the definition.
Yeah. And having that market ICP, like, assuming you don't have this crazy TAM that is the entire world, the ICP in market part is what, 3 to 5%, if you're lucky. So that's the part, that's what people refer to as demand capture. They're actively searching. So just to tie it back, the demand creation side, that's kind of the way to look at it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. The big thing to remember is both TAM and ICP are dynamic, right? Somebody doesn't have it's a 0 today. They don't have the problem. And then tomorrow they do, whatever. Let's assume you sell whatever. You're a management consulting firm that sells, one of your offerings is change management for M&A. Well, if you're not acquiring a company, you're a 0. You don't have the need. Now you're entering in an agreement to acquire a company. Now you have the need. Now you're in the TAM. So, and then whatever you're considering it, let's just say now you're like, okay, well, I probably should research and see, like, is there somebody that I might want to look at, whatever, right? Or you've decided that that's going to be your strategy, I should say. That's probably a better way to describe it. And then you're like, okay, great. I'm entering an agreement to acquire somebody, or we're starting those discussions. I need this service like today, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not to mention even the macro changes as well, where a whole new bucket of people will flood into that because the world changed all of a sudden, right? So I think you see that a lot in weird economic times. So there's probably a lot of companies that completely thrive during this downturn where a whole other, nice to have software is just completely tanked, right?
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a whole different conversation around like, are you a must have or a nice to have?
Yeah. Everyone thinks they're a must have. Very, very few actually are. It's kind of the issue there.
Yep.
And then another, definition that I want to dive into that you mentioned is around referrals. So I've had people talk about this in very different ways. And it's interesting because people hear referral or partnership, and in their mind, they have a set idea of what that is. Even when I hear partnership, I think another company that is, I don't know, going to have a referral agreement or co-sell for us is where my mind goes.
Yep.
And I know it's actually more than that, but even knowing that, that's where my mind goes. So I'm curious your thoughts there. Like, what's wrong with that definition? How would you actually define it?
So I don't think there's anything wrong with that definition for partnership, at least, I would say.
Yeah.
I think the problem with that definition, usually when people hear the word referral, their automatic thing is, well, it's not like referrals aren't scalable and they're not predictable. And they're not scalable or predictable because their sources are limited, meaning it's a referral partnership agreement or it's customers and maybe in certain instances, employees. And again, most companies haven't actually operationalized any of those things. Maybe the referral partnership side. And even then, like when they think operationalized, they think, oh, well, we have an agreement and we have a, annual meeting and that's it. You haven't really operationalized your partnership program at that point. And I'm not even going to pretend to be a partnership expert for that matter, but I know enough to be dangerous on that side. But I think the limiting belief is, again, well, they're not scalable, they're not predictable because of this. When in reality, so somebody asked me about it. I posted on LinkedIn the other day, and it made me think about, there was a study, I think it was LinkedIn's study from maybe a year or two ago, where they came up with, people can't remember the magnitude of the impact, but like significantly more likely to find a new job if they have more like loose connections than like fewer like really strong connections.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the same principle really applies to referrals, because why do these people find jobs? Because they get a referral or a connection or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing, in my opinion, with any kind of, which is there are three types of referrals. There's an affinity referral, there's a conversation referral, and there's a relationship referral. And the definition of those matters. So the affinity referral, that's actually where, again, I would say you could call it dark social, you can call it word of mouth, but it's still a referral. Because like if you look up definition, like the dictionary definition of referral, it's pretty much somebody recommending you. That's really all it is, right? I forget the formal wording for it, but so what happens a lot is whatever you'll see people's content, you'll watch their videos, maybe you'll attend a webinar or a live event, or you listen to their podcast, whatever it is. You do it enough where you build up some level of trust and affinity to the person and the brand potential, right? Now, if you don't, you don't. But if you do, and then somebody in your network goes, hey, I'm looking for such and such thing or such and such service, you're likely to go, oh, you should check out so-and-so or XYZ company. They seem like they're legit. Never worked with them before, but they seem really solid. I do it all the time.
Yeah. So do
freelancers and whatever. Right. Like the other day was somebody I was asking for SEO freelancers, and I recommended two people I've never worked with, but I've consumed their content. I know other people that have worked with them and have said good things about them. I've never met them in person, I threw their names out. I'm like, hey, you might want to check out these two. Never worked with them, but I hear really great things.
Yeah.
Right. Zero skin off my back. No social capital involved. If they decide to work with them and it doesn't work out, I don't care. I don't look bad for it because I said I've never worked with them, but they seem solid.
Mm-hmm.
That's your affinity referral. The conversation referral is whatever. Let's assume tomorrow I'm talking to somebody and they go, hey, you know what? We really want to get more testimonials. Really want to make them. We know we need to do it. We don't really know exactly how. We know we need to make them higher production value, whatever. Like, hey, you know what? You should go talk to, Dustin and Testimonial Hero because they do really great work. I hear. I talked to them, never worked with them, but I've talked to them. They seem like they have a really awesome process. That's your conversation referral.
Yep.
Right? It's you and I are acquaintances at this point. You were on our show. I'm now on yours, whatever. Like we talked.
Yep.
I have trust built up in what you all can offer. That's another fairly big missed opportunity because most people don't focus on that kind of thing. They really focus on building relationships with just their target ICP and decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the relationship referral, which for the most part is, yes, it's clients and partners. But what's missed there's actually also a pretty big opportunity. So most people think in the present, meaning who are my clients today that can give me referrals? Who are my partners today that can give me referrals? And who are my employees today that can give me referrals? Those are the three core buckets. But what you should be thinking about is past, present, and future. So past, what about past clients?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you we've had past clients that have referred us business. Why? Because part of the reason why is we've done good work, we parted on good terms, and we had a really great offboarding process. So they feel good when they end our relationship with us. So if the next day somebody comes, they're talking to somebody and it's a problem that we can solve, they'll go, oh, hey, yeah, you should go talk to Proofpoint.
Yeah.
And they have no issue with it. Same thing with employees. We've had past employees consistently recommend us to people because we part on good terms. We have a great offboarding process. We help them find new jobs, all this kind of stuff. So it seems like these unscalable things, but you can put a very solid process against it and create an environment, an ecosystem where every person you build a solid relationship with, even when that with the revenue generating relationships or from a business perspective is done, they can still refer you business and they're going to want it. Same thing is true with, key opinion leaders. So most people think of today, well, who do I know today that I can build a relationship with and have a relationship that I could co-market? What people forget is what about future? So what if there's an up and coming person in that field, whatever, let's say you're selling HR software. Okay. And there's a, recruitment consultant or recruiter out there that's got a recruiting firm that's just up and coming. They seem to be gaining traction. What if you can give them the stage? You invite them onto your show, you co-promote something with them, you build up their presence more so that when they meet more people, now there's the reciprocity thing happening. I think you and I have talked about it when you were on our show last.
Yep.
So all of these things put together can create what we call this relationship velocity flywheel, which is really focused on referrals of all three kinds, right? Affinity referral, conversation referral, and relationship referral.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to break it down. I think some of the little bit more controlling people are going to think, okay, great, but how do I measure this? How do I put the process in place? Like what percentage do people get? And they'll go that route. Whereas, I think flywheel is a better way to describe it, where it's one of those things you just have to get going and building the processes throughout your company. So is that kind of a definitional thing that people have to get over? Like you can't own it all?
Yes and no. So you can measure it, actually.
Yeah.
It takes time to really get that level of measurement, meaning over time, if you set up these systems, you should be able to see, okay, first of all, what you want to look at in aggregate, right? So you're going to focus on a number of different referral categories. What you want to start seeing is referral revenue going up. You want to see LTVs ideally start going up over time. You want to see also your net revenue going up as well.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not just reallocating percentage of your revenue into referrals. Your referral percentage is growing and it's increasing your net, your total. Right. And then you can start breaking it down by, okay, well, here's what happens with my employee-based referrals, current or past. And again, it's just, to a certain extent, it's just having the rigor to label it appropriately in your CRM. It's not that difficult. Create a couple of custom fields and make sure you're logging it appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. Making sure you're asking as well, because otherwise it'll all look
Asking
like
the
Google.
question.
I think the conversational affinity one is interesting because you can kind of tag team those, which is honestly what we do a little bit with this podcast.
Yep.
Like I get the conversational ones by having guests on who, might never buy from us, might not be a fit, like you said, but might mention it. And then I get great content with people who know their stuff in other areas, which builds affinity and trust. So I think that's one side that some type of show, whether it's a live webinar, podcast, interview series, whatever, is a great way to do it.
Yep.
I'm curious on the past customer side as well. So one of our most successful campaigns ever was actually doing that. Just reaching out to people and saying, hey, you worked at company X and you used us there. Now you're at company Y. If you ever need help, let us know. One of our most successful campaigns. So how do you operationalize something like that and make it a process? Because we did it as a one-off when I know I need to build this into a consistent campaign.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things. One is, even before that, what you have to ensure is, so what you talked about is, okay, somebody worked with you and then they left.
Yeah.
That's one thing. What I was actually talking about is when they use you for a while and then they decide to, hey, we're going to hire an internal in-house video team and we're not going to use Testimonial Hero. Okay. So the same thing happens for consultancies, the same thing happens for agencies. And what a lot of the time happens is sort of the relationship starts to fizzle out, right? It's like, oh, well, they're leaving us. They're breaking up with us. We're going to do the bare minimum, right? Sometimes it's unconscious.
Yep.
So it's creating, a lot of it is sort of this, it's to a certain extent scalable, but it's putting a process around what does your offboarding look like? So when somebody, trying to save the relationship, sometimes it's passive. Again, somebody decided to build an in-house team. You're not going to convince them not to. It's like, right. So how do you make that transition worth their while? Can you help them? Can you hey, you know what? It's awesome you're doing this. Let us help you train your team on some of the things that we do really well that are behind the scenes that you've never been exposed to, because we know it's going to help your team ramp up. Wow. Yeah, that sounds great. They'll even pay you for it.
Yeah.
It might be, we've had a client that's come to us and said, hey, this doesn't make any sense for us anymore. We're going to invest in another area. This has been great, but we have a smaller budget. And I'm like, hey, no problem. You're still going to need this part of what we do for you. It doesn't make sense for us to do it for you. It's going to be too expensive for you. It doesn't fit our model. We can find you the right resource. Yeah, that'd be great. And they pay us for it. They literally pay us to staff either a fractional or usually it's like a freelance type resource. So that kind of thing. And they feel good about it because they now trust the resource that's getting brought on. So it seems like it's unscalable, but you can put a process in place that whenever your account manager has a list of questions they need to answer and a set of things that they need to do when an offboarding happens. And then for what you're talking about, again, I think you can even automate a lot of that stuff, right? You can track in Sales Navigator when somebody switches jobs, that's on your list. You can have use Zapier or whatnot to track that in your CRM. And then based on that, you can have an automated email go out, right? Depending on what kind of product or service you're offering, you may or may not want to do it out in an automated fashion. You may want to make it very personal. But either way, as long as the process exists and there's like a reminder in your calendar that pops up or an alert saying, hey, this person just switched jobs. You might want to reach out to them, 4 weeks from now, once they've kind of stopped drinking from the fire hose. Yeah. That kind of.
Yeah. I think I'm going to really oversimplify it here, but on the relationship side, it's, just help people and be good to them and you'll see some returns there and build that into your process. Like another one we see is I've seen this at multiple companies where someone comes in, we do a demo for them or sales call or whatever, and we flat out tell them, hey, we're not the right fit. This company's probably good for you. I can send an intro. You can go talk to them. When that person goes to a company that is a fit, they come back. Whereas, maybe the hard sell there is, no, all their competitors suck. We're the best. Go with us,
Yep.
even if it's a horrible fit. So it's kind of thinking about what's actually best for the person rather than just for the company.
100%. Well, and then again, I think gets into the mindset of, are you focused on the outcome, which is revenue, or are you focused on the thing that drives revenue, which is the relationship? And your actions and activity needs to be based on the source of future revenue, which is that relationship. Like, perfect example
it's
of what we're
the
talking about.
little bit of delayed gratification there, a bit, right? Like think a bit longer term about what's actually going to pan out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we hit on a bunch of different areas. So demand creation, referrals, relationship led growth, a whole bunch. I know you talk about this and a bunch more on LinkedIn, other places. So if any of our listeners do want to connect, learn more about you or Proofpoint, where should they go?
LinkedIn for sure. I mean, me and a bunch of our team are fairly active, so feel free to reach out there. We host a bi-weekly Relationship-Led Growth Live, where we talk about a lot of these topics and things related to relationship-led growth. And last but not least, we're launching. We host the Master Marketer Show that's more focused on marketing things. Dustin, you were just on it. Yep. And then we're launching 2 new shows. One's called Outbound. It's going to be launching, I forget the exact date, but sometime mid to late September. That's really focused on activating and doing outbound sales in a non-salesy way. So call it social selling, whatever. And then I'm going to be hosting a new show called Relationship Mindset, where I want to tell the business building relationship stories from entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs. So that's our ecosystem, if you will.
Awesome. So I'll include those links for everyone. This episode, September now, it goes live in October. So I think everything there will be live. So check all that out. And Mike, thanks again for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to this episode. My key takeaway is around the point Mike made about the 3 levels of referrals. So there's 1, an affinity referral, which is where you've never had a conversation or worked with the person or company, but they built trust and affinity, usually through their content, so that you actually will recommend them. Next, number 2, conversation referral. So this is where you refer acquaintances who you have had conversations with and built trust with. So think, I was a guest on Mike's podcast, he was a guest on ours. That would be a conversation referral if I recommend him or vice versa. And finally, a relationship referral, which is from partners, clients, and employees. So more the typical approach. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and hit follow, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.